This one should be fun. This is the opening shot of Chantal Akerman's No Home movie. And if you're familiar with the filmmaker's previous work, you won't be surprised when you notice how this shot is deliberately long. The camera sits on that image for what seems to be an eternity. And it makes you wonder, why exactly am I watching this? We soon learn that this documentary is a sort of journal that chronicles the final months in the life of her mother, Natalia Akerman. And through a series of conversations, we witness her health slowly deteriorate. But it's obviously not only that. The film has scenes where the camera will focus on the desert, or on Natalia's maid, or, and I know this sounds a bit weird, emptiness. And it makes you wonder, why exactly am I watching this? Because I'll be honest with you, after watching No Home movie, I was left a bit cold. Like I'd seen something that defied narrative conventions to the point of almost being experimental and rejecting the notion of entertainment. Which is not usually the kind of cinema I enjoy, as I felt a frigid detachment from the material. That's not to say there's not a story being told. The intimacy between Chantal and her mother is what drives the film forward. But on top of that, there's a vast sense of exploring the mundane. From a technical aspect alone, the digital camera that Chantal uses to record her footage gives the film an air of, no pun intended, a home movie. And more often than not, the camera will be handheld as Chantal records her laptop screen whenever she talks with her mother over Skype. And when they're in person, the camera will stay slightly off to the side and give you a kind of voyeuristic feeling. Chantal's camera being there is ordinary. It's part of the world she lives in. It becomes mundane. And she does recognize the value in the day-to-day life. In fact, she finds it captivating. Her landmark film, Jean Dielman Her landmark film, Jean Dielman, follows the title character in a deliberately lengthy fashion. Chantal is enthralled by these little moments where Jean peels potatoes, makes a meatloaf, or has dinner with her son. You know, things that would normally be left on the cutting room floor. Daily rituals that filmmakers usually skip over when they tell their stories. Chantal, on the other hand, relishes this, and wants the audience to feel the passing of time with her characters, as staggering as that may be.
And the most important things we have in life, it's time and duration. It's very important to feel the duration, because the duration is given to you, and then you feel that you are living. When you see a film and then at the end you say, hey, I didn't feel the time passing by, I really feel that you were stolen.
But there's a 40-year gap between Jean Dielman and No Home movie. Both films share similar aspects, but there's bound to be a different approach to filmmaking between 25-year-old Chantal and 65-year-old Chantal. And yet, that fascination with mundanity remains visible in her later work. But unlike Jean Dielman, I feel as if the documentary style of No Home movie lacks something, and it leaves me a bit frustrated. There's no denying in the powerful intimacy that the personal element brings to the film.
Quoi, y a plus de distance dans le monde.
But still, if cinema is stripped down to its bare, minimal essentials, and it's just comprised of a camera pointing at something, or at nothing, and letting it play out in real time, is that cinema in its purest essence, or is it not? Is it something else entirely? Why exactly am I watching this? What differentiates Chantal talking to her mother for a long period of time and putting it on camera to this video of comedian Tom Segura speaking with his mother?
Hoy estoy aquí con la mía, Charo,
¿Con la tuya qué?
mi madre.
Ya, pero no concha tu madre, ¿no? Ya es tu madre. Con respeto, Tommy.
Perhaps I'm grasping at straws here, but I do think there's a legitimate argument to be made when it comes to whether one should classify this as cinema. A definition that I've recently stumbled upon and find very articulate and accurate is one given by Steven Soderbergh. Now, bear with me here, because in terms of directors, Soderbergh is probably the antithesis to Akerman. Yet, here's how he describes cinema.
Cinema is a specificity of vision. It's an approach in which everything matters. It's the polar opposite of generic or arbitrary, and the result is as unique as a signature or a fingerprint. And it isn't made by a committee, and it isn't made by a company, and it isn't made by the audience. It means that if this filmmaker didn't do it, it either wouldn't exist at all, or it wouldn't exist in anything like this form.
Thank you for that, Stephen. It was lovely. Clearly, Chantal's work does carry a specificity of vision, as she chooses to venture towards mundanity and attempts to find truth and beauty in it. The authenticity with which she designs No Home Movie makes for a very personal experience, especially considering just how much her mother has influenced her, from the beginning of her career to her last days. Jeanne Dielman borrows a lot of aspects from the way Chantal would perceive Natalia as she grew up. She had been taken to the concentration camps and survived, but she would not talk about her experiences when Chantal was a child, keeping a certain distance from these harsh aspects of life. And this translates to the way she would go on to shoot Delphine Seyrig in the titular role.
My parents were working very hard because at the time we were very poor. My mother didn't want me to play in the street, so I was looking at the window all the time, you know, alone and looking at the window. And feeling, I always, up to now, feel like an old child.
Moreover, her documentary released 2 years following Jeanne Dielman, News from Home, would feature scenery from New York paired with Chantal's voiceover as she read the letters her mother had sent her between 1971 and 1973. It's no secret the bond between a mother and a daughter is incomparable and quite unique. In the case of Chantal and Natalia, it's a relationship that has seemingly stood strong for decades and has informed the filmmaker's point of view significantly as an artist. Opting for an almost autobiographical approach to her work adds a layer of familiarity, remaining faithful to the mundane facets of life. But to what purpose does she do this? This brought to mind a video by Jamie Windsor I'd found recently, where he explores the work of photographer Nan Golding and the concept of wabi-sabi. I'll leave the link to his video in the description below, but just to briefly summarize, it speaks of how the imperfect nature of Golding's photographs adds a certain value to them. They can be out of focus, blurry, but all in all, they feel personal. And that characteristic elevates her work. The reason why I find a correlation between Akerman and Golding is because Golding often takes photos of her so-called tribe, friends, and family. That distinctive insight into an artist's life carries an enormous significance. It reminds the spectator of home, of the people we are closest to. It's ordinary, but affectionate. It takes us to a place where we ache to go again.
To a place where we know we are loved.
God, I love this show. This is Don Draper, the creative director for an ad agency. In this scene, he's pitching how to market a product that allows you to revisit old photographs, to revisit moments frozen in time. And he's figured out the best way to sell the client into the way his agency wants to sell this product is to have them take a peek into his own personal life. Don Draper is weaponizing an element to sell this product, and that element is
Nostalgia. It's delicate, but potent.
and he's right. It's amazing the variety of things your brain goes back to when revisiting flashes of the mundane. Dipping ever so slightly into the vast ocean of memories one carries behind them. The emotions that it brings up. It rings all too true. Akerman's work is prosaic, and its genuine nature is where its worth lies. But whereas we might look at our own life, our own work, our own accomplishments, and the people around us, and think back to a place we call home, Chantal doesn't necessarily feel like she has one.
My parents came from Poland, then they arrived in Brussels. Then I left for Paris, then I left for New York, then I went a little bit in Israel, then I went a little bit there. So I don't feel that I belong at all. Sometimes it's hard because belonging can give you a kind of peacefulness, but I don't belong. I'm like an outcast.
With a mentality like this, it won't come as a surprise to hear that Chantal Akerman struggled with mental illness. And it also saddens me that No Home Movie serves as the closing chapter of her life, because only a few months after its release, Chantal took her own life. No Home Movie goes on to become not only a farewell from Chantal to her mother, but also a farewell to us, her audience. But listen, I'm no expert, and I'm probably not the person to make a video essay analyzing the work of Akerman, given that I arrived to her quite late. I only watched Jeanne Dielman for the first time in 2019, and I won't lie to you, while I appreciated what it stood for and the craft behind it, it's not like I adored it. And as I'd mentioned earlier, there's an air of aloofness from No Home Movie that fails to make me feel strongly about the documentary. Perhaps I can quote Elisa Leibau's article, Identity Sleeps, the autobiographical register in the work of Chantal Akerman, where she says, No Home Movie is clearly far more than an homage to a dying mother, and more too than a swan song. It can be seen in part as the distillation of an entire oeuvre, artlessly yet honestly reduced to its most elemental form, with nearly all the tropes of a 4-decade-long career present, and none more so than the mother. There is a technique Chantal uses, or rather chooses not to use, throughout her filmography, which is the use of low angles. She often shoots with the camera pointing straight on her character's eye level, making you part of their world.
Because of the second commandment of God. Do you know the second commandment of God?
She's referring to, Thou shalt not make false idols. Thou shalt not make any graven image and bow down to them, nor serve them.
I don't want to make idolatric images. You know, when I shoot and there is the actors there, the actor is the other. And then the viewer is also the other. So there is no idolatry.
Through her lens, Akerman shows you exactly what to see. And in the case of the shooting of No Home Movie, she brings this aesthetic of hers down to its most personal level. She relishes the mundane because without it, life is nothing. Life isn't comprised of big dramatic arcs. It's comprised of this. That's the purpose behind her method. Where some see emptiness, Akerman sees beauty.
Bon, allez,
Voilà.
mamie, je t'embrasse, hein.
Oui, chou.
À
Et bonne
tout-
chance, travaille bien.
À tout de suite.
À tout de suite, chérie.